Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell was released for the PC, original Xbox, PlayStation 2, and Nintendo GameCube on November 17, 2002. Marketed under the tagline Stealth Action Redefined, it garnered near universal critical and commercial acclaim and quickly replaced the Metal Gear franchise, at least in the English-speaking world, as the epitome of the stealth genre. The game sold approximately 1.58 million copies in the first 3 weeks, counting both pre-orders and sales within the first 3 weeks, which, by 2002 standards, was a monumental success. Today, I will be doing a retrospective on the PC version of this game. What's up guys, Acer Thorn here, and welcome to another video game analysis and retrospective video. I do these analysis and discussion videos on a regular basis, so if you'd like to see more of them, hit that subscribe button to stay notified. Now I should point out that I will not be covering the story of this game in depth. The reason for this is because, well, there's not that much for me to say. It's just one action movie cliche after another. If you've ever played a Tom Clancy game before, if you've ever read a Tom Clancy novel before, if you've ever played a Call of Duty game before, then you know exactly what you're getting out of this game story-wise. You've got your generic I Hate America guerrilla guys, your standard POW subplot, your standard attempts to hijack the oil industry, yada yada yada. I've seen Mario platformers that have more interesting plot twists than this game's story. That's no exaggeration. So if you want an in-depth story analysis for this game, this is not the video for you. Now, with that said, let's get this party started by talking about the gameplay and controls. When I played this game when it first came out, I played it on the PS2. This time around, as I played the game for footage, I played it on the PC. I can't help but shake the feeling that this game was simply designed to be played with a controller, because this game is all about moving slowly so as not to make too much noise. This is the most immersive when using an analog thumbstick to move around. If you tilt it only slightly, Sam will move slowly. The lighter you tilt the thumbstick, the slower Sam moves. However, the PC version of this game doesn't have gamepad support, so you're playing with the keyboard and mouse because there is simply no other option. I tried mapping the buttons to a gamepad, but the game didn't register. The problem with this, however, is that the keyboards and mice don't allow for analog movement. To move, you have to use the WASD keys. Because those keys are digital, Sam's movement speed is instead governed by the mouse wheel. Scroll up with the mouse wheel and Sam will speed up. Scroll down with the mouse wheel and he'll slow to a crawl. The problem here is that this makes it much easier to precisely control Sam's movement speed. This is a huge break in immersion for me. On the consoles, you really need to show some restraint when moving Sam around. Your precise control of the D-stick is crucial to ensuring that the enemies don't detect you. But on the PC, it's as simple as scrolling down on the mouse wheel. There's no restraint, there's no careful control, it's as easy as pressing a single button. It honestly feels like using a save state in a platformer. I can try as many times as I need to clear a specific jump because I can just reload to immediately before the jump happens, which completely undermines 99.99% of the challenge. To me, having Sam's movement speed controlled by the mouse wheel is equally game-breaking for me. Now, I have heard other people say that the PC version of the game is the definitive version to play for one simple reason: the ability to quick save. The console versions only allow you to save your game at designated spots. If you died, you would have to do the entire sequence from the last checkpoint to the spot where you died all over again. But on the PC version, you have the ability to quick save as well as make manual saves whenever and wherever you like. Now, if you were playing the games on the original hardware, I suppose this would give the PC version an edge. For the record, when I played this game for footage for this retrospective, I did indeed play it on the PC. However, I should emphasize that the quick save is only really an advantage if you insist on playing the game on the original hardware. If you're playing the game on an emulator, you can honestly just use save states, which are just as good as quick saving. Now, some of you might reasonably wonder, why would I bash save states and then turn around 30 seconds later and say that save states for this game are as good as the quick save feature? Well, if you're using save states for a platformer, such as Super Mario World, then you're basically just using a cheat to get you through an already well-crafted and well-balanced game. Having to go back to the start or halfway point of the level in those games feels like a reasonable punishment for falling into a pit, because the platforming obstacles you were faced with in those games are fair enough to get past anyway. By contrast, the first Splinter Cell game constantly throws unfair crap at you. If you're spotted, you can often go from full health to dead before you even have time to draw your own weapon to fight back. And the game, more often than it has any right to, often puts enemies in places you can't possibly anticipate enemies being, and it often feels cheap, rather than designed to give you a fair challenge. I remember playing this game and, on more than one occasion, feel like the developers were simply trolling me with cheap deaths. Obviously, what counts as fair and what counts as cheap will differ from person to person, but this person feels like the quick saves and save states in the first Splinter Cell game are necessary just to bring the game up to par, not to cheat your way out of platforming challenges. Speaking of platforming, I should emphasize that this game is indeed a platformer. Yeah, it wasn't marketed as a platformer back in 2002 when this game was released, but this game is indeed a platformer. You need look no further than the first section of the tutorial mission to see that. Jumping onto ledges, jumping up to grab onto pipes, jumping off walls to reach even higher ledges. Look me in the eye with a straight face and tell me that this isn't platforming. If I had to speculate as to why this game was not marketed as a platformer when it was released, I would probably guess that platformers at the time were mostly associated with Nintendo, and Nintendo at the time had a stigma for being for kids. And since Ubisoft was actively going for a T14 ESRB rating, no more, no less, they probably wanted to avoid Splinter Cell being indirectly thought of as a kiddie game. For the record, Nintendo is not for kids. Nintendo is family friendly. And now more than ever in 2020, that is an important distinction to make, as YouTube creators are constantly having to worry about copy compliance. But make no mistake, lack of marketing notwithstanding, this game is very much a platformer. Now, why am I spending so much time pointing out that this game is a platformer? What difference does that make? Well, it's because understanding what genre this game is crucial to understanding how to judge it. Think about it this way. Would you consider criticism of a Fallout game to be fair if it criticizes just how stiff and jerky the guns are? No, probably not. Fallout is an RPG franchise. The focus is on the world and the characters, with the guns being an incidental part of the package. So the stiff and jerky gun mechanics get a pass because they aren't the focus. Call of Duty, meanwhile, would not get that same pass because guns are the whole point of that genre. Likewise, accurately identifying this game's genre is going to be crucial to understanding what parts I should criticize more heavily than others. Because I have determined that this game is in fact a platformer, I will judge it as such. That being said, I still feel the need to criticize at least one aspect of this game's gun mechanics. Despite this being predominantly a platformer, the act of shooting out the lights and cameras so you can stay hidden is a main gameplay mechanic in this game. So how well the game actually handles that mechanic is worth criticizing, and in a word, this game's handling of this mechanic is atrocious. You can take forever and a day to line up your shots against the lights, but whether you actually hit the lights seems entirely RNG dependent. Now, if you're moving around, the aiming reticle spreads out, so I can understand that the bullet has a random chance of hitting anywhere inside that aiming reticle. That seems fair. However, if you stand completely still, the aiming reticle seems to shrink. However, you still seem to have a chance to miss. The aiming reticle may get smaller, but it apparently never gets so small that you are guaranteed to hit. To show you what I mean, take a look at this sequence from the third mission. I have my aiming reticle perfectly lined up with this guy's head, and I quick-saved. I fire the gun and then immediately reload. Sometimes I get a headshot and sometimes it skids right past his head. Even though I'm not adjusting my aiming in any way, whether I actually hit this guy is entirely based on RNG. This is complete and total bullshit. You have extremely limited ammo in this game, so you have to make every shot count. And if you were playing on consoles on the original hardware, you don't even have the luxury of quick saving. You see what I mean earlier when I said that quick saving and save stating in this game isn't a cheat, but something that is necessary just to bring the game up to par? Then again, maybe you really are supposed to have a 100% chance of hitting your opponent if you're standing still, but the game just suffers from a lack of polish in this regard. Credence to this theory is lent when I try to do some actual platforming. For example, in this section of the tutorial, I'm supposed to jump up and ride a zipline down to the next platform. Only problem is that I keep jumping, but Sam doesn't grab on. In the third mission, I kept getting stuck on this section right here, where my character's toe, I guess, apparently got wedged in between two blocks in the level, and Sam apparently couldn't progress, and I couldn't even jump to get out. I had to reload the mission in order to try again. Honestly, the game quite simply should not have been released in such an unfinished state. Bear in mind that this game predates the advent of post-release patches to fix games. Once this game shipped, then that's it. It was done. So they really should have given this game a few extra coats of polish before they shipped it out. I also find the way this game handles covert missions to be rather baffling. Third Echelon is, without a shadow of a doubt, an unconstitutional agency. If the existence of this agency were ever made public, it would be a PR nightmare for the US government, both domestically, as a matter of constitutional law, and internationally as a matter of international relations. To ensure that the USA's hands are considered clean, Third Echelon has a system in place known as Protocol 6. It's heavily expanded in the tie-in novels, but it basically means that Splinter Cells who get caught or who die in the line of duty are erased from existence, and the US government disavows any affiliation with them. This is, supposedly, the whole reason why Splinter Cells are supposed to sneak around, rather than go in full guns blazing. This would also explain why the mission usually gets aborted if you set off one too many alarms. So, naturally, they don't want you to get caught, right? And yet, you are allowed, and even expected, to knock guards out, which may not set off an immediate alarm, but unless you kill them, they'll wake up eventually. Wouldn't that give away the fact that the USA was snooping around? Maybe you could say that if they only see you, they wouldn't know anything about you except that you're Caucasian, which doesn't give away your nationality. But even then, there are quite a few instances where you interrogate NPCs and they'll certainly recognize your accent as being American. And don't tell me that it's okay if they find out about you as long as you're long gone. While that may mean that Sam Fisher can't be hunted down and killed in retaliation for his intrusions, if the people know that some American had just digged up some super important intelligence, don't you think that would compel them to change their battle plans just a tiny bit in order to throw the Americans off the trail? And yet, Anytime Sam recovers any intel from an enemy base, following that intel always leads them to the next logical step in preventing International Crisis number 15,378. Whether the enemy actually knows that the secrecy of their plans has been compromised seems entirely irrelevant. They still proceed with their plans as if the Americans don't know about them, and they still have the element of surprise even when they know damn well they don't. Hell, even if you play every mission perfectly and never set off any alarms, there are several scripted instances in this game where the guards are alerted to your presence, one as early as the second mission in the game, and yet they still proceed with their plans like nothing ever happened. Apparently, that thing where the guards see a light get shot out and then perform only a cursory glance in your general area before giving up and assuming that it was just the wind that shot a bullet into the light, that apparently is more than just a game mechanic, but actually how the characters behave in-universe as well. Because this game is supposedly about staying out of sight and not alerting anyone to your presence, you're often encouraged to take heavy detours to get from point A to point B. You're not supposed to just go through the door and down the hallway. Find an air vent and crawl through it instead. Don't just walk down the aisle, grab hold of the pipe and shimmy across to stay out of sight. It sounds like a cool concept, except for one problem. There are just as many places in the game where you are indeed expected to simply walk down the hallways and go through the doors. Talk about mixed messages! This game is extremely linear. In almost all cases, there is only one way to do any given task. So it's not like there are other paths that I'm just not noticing. If I can simply go through the door, then I'm supposed to simply go through the door. So let's discuss each of the missions in depth. This game is exclusively single player, so the single player campaign is really all there is to talk about. The tutorial is certainly passable as a tutorial, but there is one anomaly I'd like to discuss. Early in the tutorial, there's a door that's keypad locked. You are tasked with sneaking up behind a guard and interrogating him to learn the combination of the door. What really shocked me about this sequence is that this is literally the only time in the game where you actually learn a keypad by interrogation. No, seriously, considering how often it's used in later games, you might be surprised to hear that it's never used in the first game outside of the tutorial. The game where you actually get taught how to do it. Literally every other time in the game, you either get the combination via a satchel off someone's dead or unconscious body, learn it from a computer, or, and this is really fucking dumb, wait for someone to input the keypad combination and then use your thermal vision to see which buttons he pressed in the right order. Seriously, guys, why are you even going to bother teaching me to interrogate people for door combinations if you are quite literally never going to have me do that out in the field? Thankfully, future games actually use this feature. I would say that they use it more often, but quite frankly, the fact that they use it at all is an improvement over this game. So anyway, we then move on to the first actual mission of the game. Our first restriction is to stay off the streets. If we even so much as touch down on the streets for any reason, it results in an automatic mission failure. Frankly, this restriction seems rather arbitrary. Just because I set one foot on the streets, the mission is instantly aborted? Considering how expensive this mission must have been to set up, you're going to pull the plug just like that? For that matter, this entire restriction only really becomes relevant in one section of the entire mission. There's only one spot you even can land on the streets before the restriction is lifted. So really, it honestly seems like this restriction is merely intended as a replacement for fall damage in this one instance, since they apparently didn't want to put a ladder or a pipe you can climb back up in order to get back up to the rooftops. Honestly, that just seems lazy to me. Once the ground level restriction is rescinded, our job is to break into the police department and find a couple of dead bodies inside the morgue. One thing I hate about this set piece is that even if you shoot out the lights inside the morgue, the camera will still detect you. Apparently this camera is equipped with night vision. You have to actually shoot the camera itself in order to get past this section without triggering an alarm. Honestly, that's just dumb. We never covered night vision cameras in basic training, and while I don't mind the game throwing curveballs at me to keep me on my toes, I'd appreciate if the first mission in the game was relatively part of the course with no surprises. After that, we head over to the British Ministry, and we're told not to trigger any alarms at all. One alarm results in an instant game over. Honestly, that is too harsh of a restriction for so early in the game. Restrictions like that should come in the second half of the game, if not the third trimester. After we interrogate somebody's driver, our next objective is to eavesdrop on a conversation using our laser mic. A laser mic which we just happen to have in this mission for no reason. Gee, that sure is convenient. Despite the fact that Lambert had no way of knowing at the beginning of this mission that we were going to need this laser mic for any kind of eavesdropping, we somehow have a laser mic, and lo and behold, we just happen to end up needing it for this mission. Also, Fisher says that he'll need to disable the laser grid in the courtyard in order to avoid triggering an alarm, but he never actually disables it. Consistency? What's that? After the laser mic conversation, we're told to hack into some foreign random jackass's computer, but we are given absolutely fuck all details about exactly where to go. There's a door on the opposite side of the courtyard, so maybe I should go through there. Well, the only thing that location provides is a medical kit. Look at this, I'm just running around with absolutely no direction. Now, would you believe me if I said that this isn't even my own footage? This is the footage of a long play I checked out in order to figure out where to go. Wrap your head around that for a minute. This game is so cryptic and so lacking in a sense of direction that even the online guides I use to figure out what to do often resort to running around like chickens with their heads cut off. So anyway, what I'm supposed to do is climb up this section of the wall like a fence. Simple enough once you realize that's what you're supposed to do, but it would have been nice if the game had given me a little push in that direction. Once I reach the guy's computer, there's a scripted sequence where the enemy knows you're there, and 3 armed guys come in to try and take you out. This is the first of many scripted sequences in the game where you get discovered automatically, no matter how well hidden you might be. But in this one case, I don't really mind. I don't normally like these sequences because they tend to focus on head-to-head combat instead of stealth, and I don't play Splinter Cell to have a shootout. But in this case, you can simply hang off the side of the window out of sight. Since you have a stealthy option for getting past this section, I don't really mind it all that much, although, as I mentioned earlier, it is a break in immersion that the enemy still proceeds with their plans despite knowing full well that America is now privy to them. Once that mission is complete, we then head over to an oil rig that is surprisingly well protected despite it being of seemingly little strategic importance. And before you ask, no, we're never going to find out why exactly this unimportant rig is so well protected. We're meant to tail one of these guys and steal his briefcase. However, if we even so much as get seen by this guy or either of his 2 personal bodyguards, that results in an automatic game over. Jesus, this is only the 3rd mission of the game. Can you lighten up on the automatic game over conditions just a touch? Besides, while Briefcase Guy looks distinct, his 2 bodyguards have identical character models to every other NPC in this level, so I can often get them confused for regular guards who I am indeed allowed to knock out and or kill. Seriously, would it have been so damn hard to use a couple of other character models for these two personal bodyguards? You wouldn't even have to animate a new character model from scratch. Just give us a character model from a different level to make these two bodyguards stand out in some way so I know not to attack them. Once we eavesdrop on this guy enough, we are then tasked with chasing him down and stealing his briefcase. This begs the question of why stealing the briefcase after you kill or knock out all three of these guys couldn't have simply been your mission from the get-go. What, you couldn't have just programmed a larger level? Were the developers really that lazy? So then we break into the CIA headquarters. I must say that this has got to be my favorite level in the game. For starters, this is one of the only times in the game when you actually have a choice of how to proceed. You have two ways to enter the building. The first is the easiest and safest way, but has a strict time limit to do so. The second way to enter has no time limit, but is much more difficult and dangerous. The first way is the way that Lambert actually suggests. Your crew has temporarily disabled an exhaust fan, and you can slip through the air duct in order to slip into the building. The area you enter has lots of shadow for you to use for cover, plus it's not very heavily guarded, allowing you to deal with one guard at a time. The second way is to slip in through the roof directly above the front door, depositing you directly into the main hall. However, the front door is heavily guarded on the outside, and you don't even have a gun with you at the beginning, so you have a very limited options for getting these guys out of the way, and even if you do manage to make it through there, you are deposited directly into the main hall, which is brightly lit and also heavily guarded in its own right. So overall, the beginning of this mission does a nice job of giving the player a nice choice of progression, while giving both choices their pros and cons. However, I find it rather annoying that you don't have your silenced pistol for this mission. The only thing I can think of to justify this is that you aren't allowed to kill anyone in this mission, so they take away your primary means of using lethal force. However, they still give you the SC-20K assault rifle halfway through the mission, and for that matter, why would they give you that mission if they don't trust you to follow orders? Oh, and you suddenly have heat vision goggles now all of a sudden. You know, this game just unlocks equipment for you whenever it feels like it. So, once you've done all the hacking into computers, your final objective for this mission is to capture somebody who is suspected of treason and bring him in for questioning. This has to be the most annoying single objective in the entire game. He steps outside for a smoke break, allowing you to knock him out without any witnesses, but even then, that's only halfway to the extraction point. You still have to painstakingly carry his unconscious carcass all the way to the van, taking out the other guards along the way. This is so tedious and slow that I have to wonder if the developers are intentionally trolling us. Hell, if you knock him out at any point before he takes his smoke break, Lambert mentions how you've screwed yourself.
What are you doing, Fisher? He was going in the right direction. Now you're just gonna have to carry him all the way to the truck.
So, obviously, the developers must have known how tedious this section was, otherwise they wouldn't have recorded that line. So once we bring that guy in for questioning, our next mission is in a place called Kalinatech. I'm going to assume that this is just some made-up technology company, perhaps a manufacturer of military gear. Not that this matters in the slightest for the purposes of this mission, it's just my speculation. Anyway, for some reason, we start the mission in a parking lot across the street from the place we're actually supposed to infiltrate. The only way we're able to access the location in question is because there's a convenient crane with a convenient giant block of bricks that we can use as a platform to get across. One has to wonder how Sam was supposed to get into the building if that crane wasn't there. Once inside, you find that the place is already under siege by terrorists. Because of this, You would think that alarms aren't a big deal since the entire place should already be under red alert. But no, you still get a game over if you trigger too many alarms. Why? If it's designed to force you into a stealthy playstyle, bear in mind that the wall mines already force you to move slowly. On the other hand, you really are only confined by alarms for the first half of the mission. The second half of the mission is just one shootout after another. There are way too many lights for you to shoot them all out to create enough darkness for you, and even if you did, the large amounts of fire eliminate the possibility of sticking to the shadows in half the level anyway. So going in guns blazing really is the only viable option out there. I said it before and I'll say it again, I don't play Splinter Cell games to have a shootout. Splinter Cell is supposed to be about stealth, not head-to-head combat, and if you were going to put me in situations where I have no choice but to simply use brute force, the least you could do is give Fisher enough health that he can take a few hits. His health meter is clearly balanced in favor of avoiding combat, yet you constantly throw me into forced combat situations. However, I will give it some credit. When you go to recover the encryption key from the mole in Kalinitek, you have to take an air duct to reach him. You don't simply walk down the corridor and open the door. That's what Splinter Cell should be all about. In addition to that, there was at least one section of the second half of this mission that I found kind of satisfying. On top of the staircase in the back of the auditorium, I planted a couple of wall mines. When I got the attention of the 3 guards in the generator room, 2 of them ran up the stairs to chase after me and got a face full of wall mine for their trouble. If you're going to force me into combat, the least you could do is give me ways to subtly take my enemies out. Oh, and Wilkes dies at the end of this mission. Yeah, I don't really give a fuck. I never got to know this guy, so his death means about as much to me as all the other NPCs in the game who died. After that, it's over to the Chinese embassy on US soil. Despite us actually being on American soil, we are still deposited quite a bit away from the actual embassy, and guards will still shoot us on sight even before we enter the embassy grounds. Why? Sam has every right to be on US soil, and it doesn't become Chinese soil until we actually enter the embassy. This makes no sense. For that matter, why do I have to enter through the main gate? Why can't I simply hop from rooftop to rooftop? Considering that I'm only eavesdropping on a conversation, why can't I simply be deposited right outside the embassy's main gate, or maybe a few blocks away so the embassy guards don't see me? If you're worried about the level being way too short, maybe you should have made the embassy itself life-sized. For that matter, this mission has just a stupid difficulty spike. You can't kill anybody, and you can't set off any alarms, otherwise you get an automatic game over. This is the first time you've had both restrictions simultaneously, but to add on top of the already arbitrary difficulty spike, the enemy now has hounds that can sniff you out no matter how well hidden you are. Be prepared for a lot of trial and error. This is one of those places in the game I was talking about earlier in this video, when I said that quick saving and save stating are not cheats, but rather were necessary to bring the game up to par. After we eavesdrop on the Chinese ambassador's phone call, we take a quick detour to a nearby restaurant to rescue some hostages. The first sequence is straightforward enough, but then we find ourselves in a section where there are 2 bulletproof spotlights which pan back and forth, as well as a fuck ton of landmines that result in instant death if we step on them. You can see the landmines if you turn on your heat vision, but doing so prevents you from seeing the spotlights. This is just total bullshit. This isn't a spike in difficulty, this is a spike in cheap shit. I didn't notice that you can detonate the landmines from a safe distance by shooting them, but whether the shots actually register or not seems entirely dependent on RNG, much like the aforementioned problem with shooting out the lights or getting headshots on your enemies. So when you finally make it past that annoying section, if you thought the game was done throwing unfair shit at you, you'd be dead wrong. You then come across a roof which has a glass ceiling so the people inside can see you, combined with a bulletproof theater screen which shines light on you periodically, pretty much guaranteeing you'll be spotted and an alarm will be raised. Honestly, at this point, I don't even care anymore. I just went ahead and took the alarm because I couldn't be bothered. So anyway, you disable the broadcast and suddenly find yourself in, you guessed it, another scripted shootout! Once that scripted shootout gets finished, we go through a section of the building that is full of smoke. Since this is supposed to be a restaurant, I assume this is the one place where they cook their smoked meats. You can't see in all the smoke, either in regular vision or night vision, so your heat vision goggles are necessary to navigate. However, if you're going to place that restriction on the player, I feel it's only fair that the same restriction should apply to NPCs. Despite this, NPCs can still see you. Honestly, I'm not surprised at this point. I'd honestly be more surprised if this game didn't throw cheap shit at you. So after that, you finally make it to the slaughterhouse where the company harvests its meat to use in its products. Again, you're mostly just going right down the middle of the corridors, taking out mercs as you find them. In Splinter Cell, you should be searching for ways you can sneak around them. Sure, you can stay in the shadows in this segment, but your only way forward is by killing all the guards. So we reach the end of the slaughterhouse, we meet up with several Chinese diplomats, and you'll never guess what comes after that. No, seriously, guess. Give up another scripted shootout!
Get out of the way!
For fuck's sake! If you wanted to make a runner and gunner, just make a fucking runner and gunner. But don't give me a game that purports on its face to be about stealth, but which constantly forces me into scripted shootouts. Why do you have to fucking lie? After that, it's back to the Chinese embassy, and this time I actually go inside the embassy. Now, as I begin this mission, I am told that I now have Fifth Freedom, aka the authority to use lethal force, against anyone in this mission except for guy who thinks America is a big doo-doo head, number 2,586,713. We need him alive for the, can you even call this a boss fight? We need him alive for the end of mission cutscene. Okay, so I can kill people. Cool. Except I can't really. See, as it turns out, there's quite a few doors in the Chinese embassy that are keypad locked. Lambert says I'll have to improvise in order to get past them. No problem, I'll just use that trick you guys taught me during training where I grab guys from behind and force them to tell me the door codes. Oh, wait, you expect me to wait for these guys to actually enter the combinations on the keypads and then use my heat vision to see which keys were pressed in which order. This is stupid! I mean, first of all, how fucking convenient is it that the Chinese embassy just happens to keep its air conditioner on max settings in every room in the building, so this is actually a viable option? That's even more convenient than the Crane and Kalina tank mission providing me with the brick platform. Second, what happened to interrogating people for the door codes? Why even teach me that trick in the tutorial if you're never going to have me use it? Third, if I end up killing or knocking out a guard before he's given me the door combination, I get an immediate game over. So I don't really have the authority to kill anyone I want, do I? Why give me the authority to kill and then penalize me when I use it? The only room in this entire building that was even kind of interesting is the turret-filled hallway. I'm meant to jump up onto this mantle and use it to jump further behind this turret. However, this purple vase is keeping me from actually reaching the ledge. I can't just move the vase either. I absolutely have to waste ammunition destroying it. What, you couldn't program in a simple move the vase animation? Bear in mind that the game developers absolutely expect me to destroy the vase to make room for my platforming, because this is one of the few static objects in the game that actually reacts to my gunfire, so they had to, at the very least, program in this vase's destructibility. But if they're gonna do that, it seems like it would have taken the same number of man-hours of programmer labor to program in an animation where Sam just takes his hands and simply moves the vase out of the goddamn way. Or better yet, why even have the vase there in the first place, if its only purpose is to be a minor, temporary annoyance? Was it really worth the time and energy it took to program it in? Anyway, this room is rather interesting, mainly because as soon as I jumped up to that ledge, I heard that some guards were coming. So I thought fast and deactivated the turret's IFF, causing it to turn on its own masters and gun them down, so I didn't have to. I was honestly kinda proud of myself that I was able to piece that together so quickly and on my first try. So at the end of this mission, we finally come face to face with guy who thinks America is a big doo-doo head number 2,586,713. Turns out he's depressed and wants to die. At first, he refuses to cooperate with your attempts to get him to send a confession over email, saying that the worst you can do is kill him, and that's precisely what he wants you to do.
I'm going to unlock the data in your computer, and you're going to help me.
Go to hell! You can't force a dead man into anything!
You're not dead yet. The rest of your life is all you've got, and how painful that is depends on your cooperation.
My life was suffering long before you got here. Do your worst!
Will do.
But then, when you actually go to use the computer, he cooperates any damn way. What? All of a sudden, he decides he's going to cooperate. You know what? Fuck it, I don't care anymore. This game's story doesn't make any damn sense. So after that, we have one final mission in the game. Our mission is to find the one last guy who thinks America is a big doo-doo head, and to take him out before he can spark International Crisis number 15,378. The start of this mission is honestly the most concentrated amount of pure platforming in the entire game. There's at least 3 whole minutes of nothing but navigating platforming obstacles before you encounter a single enemy. Once you make it into the palace interior, your first order of business is to gather some intel from a computer in what I assume is the Georgian equivalent of the Oval Office. I'd like to know, does this level in-game accurately reflect the floor plan of the actual Georgian presidential palace in real life? If anyone knows the answer to that, post a comment down below. I'll pin that. However, one thing I can only assume is not accurate to the real-life building is the way it handles its laser system. I suppose having lasers in place to identify intruders makes sense. The problem is that in the office where I'm supposed to hack the computer, the lasers go on and off on a timer. Why? That honestly serves no purpose in universe other than to allow spies such as myself an opportunity to slip in undetected, which kinda defeats the whole point of the lasers being there in the first place. And before anyone says it's gameplay being prioritized over immersion, bear in mind that this game so far has had no problem throwing cheap shit at the player, so why should the game, only just now, in the final mission, be concerned with giving the player a fair challenge? So considering that this is the final mission of the game, it's up to this mission to deliver a satisfying climax. So, in this game that's focused on stealth, do you want to take a wild guess as to how it handles the climax? I got 3 words for ya. Scripted, scripted, scripted shootout, scripted, scripted shootout, scripted, scripted, scripted shootout, scripted shootouts, yeah. Scripted, scripted shootout, scripted, scripted shootout, scripted, scripted shootout, scripted shootouts, shootouts, yeah. In all seriousness though, this final mission went way overboard with the whole scripted shootouts thing. In fact, this final mission literally has 3 scripted shootouts back to back. Take the elevator to the library, scripted shootout in the library. Go through a door to the library basement, another scripted shootout. Exit out that basement and enter the courtyard, a 3rd scripted shootout. The climax of this game should have been a stealth gauntlet, not a shootout gauntlet. Now, to this game's credit, the final obstacle of this mission is indeed a stealth sequence. You're faced with 2 doors. Both doors have not 1, but 2 guards, each with automatic rifles pointing right at the door. If you open either of them, you're pumped full of lead before you can even complete the door opening animation, let alone draw your weapon to fight back. So instead, you're meant to hop on top of a cabinet and slip over their heads. Now, if only the entire second half of this level were similarly focused on stealth, this might have actually been a satisfying climax. So after the final mission is over, we get a cutscene with Sam at home with his daughter, watching on the news as some random guy gets all the credit for what Sam did. Sam is having himself a nice hearty laugh, since he knows that passing the credit on to someone else was all part of the package when he signed up to be with 3rd Echelon. However, one thing that really doesn't make sense to me, yeah, something about this game's plot that not making sense, go figure, is that Sarah wonders what's so funny. This suggests that she doesn't know what her dad does for a living, because if she did, she'd know exactly what's so funny. However, in an earlier cutscene, she's talking on the phone with Sam and wondering if they've caught guy who thinks America is a big doo-doo head number 2,586,713 yet. Something she would only be curious about if she knew damn well her dad was a Splinter Cell. Now, in the Splinter Cell novels by David Michaels, it's explicit that Sarah doesn't know what her dad does for a living until the climax of the first book. In that climax, the enemy kidnaps Sarah in an attempt to get to Sam Fisher, resulting in Sam going in to rescue her. After that, she knows that her dad is a Splinter Cell and there's no way he can hide it from her anymore. I really wish the game offered a similar level of clarity about whether Sarah knew what Sam did. So that was the first Splinter Cell game. To put it mildly, this game really had some growing pains to work through. There are plenty of games out there that were great games for their time but have not aged well in the slightest. This is one such game. I remember falling in love with it when I was a kid, but in 2020, if I had to choose one word to describe this game, I would have to go with unpolished. With the sole exception of entering the CIA headquarters, the game has only one way to do any given task, yet at the same time, the path is often so vague and cryptic that it really feels like it was originally meant to be a non-linear game, but alternate paths had to be cut out due to time or budget constraints. Those same time and budget constraints also apparently kept them from ironing out the hit detection, which made the platforming and shooting incredibly wonky and jerky. The mission restrictions honestly seemed all over the place. You can't set foot on the streets until you can. One alarm means mission failure until it doesn't anymore. Now, if this game had enough time and budget to iron everything out, these restrictions should have been saved for the late game. Not only would that have added an organic sense of progressive difficulty, but it also could have made more sense with the plot. As the political tensions became more and more tense, and as the two countries got angrier and angrier with each other, more and more restrictions would have to be placed on Sam in order to prevent one or both nations from finally snapping. And oh my god, the scripted shootouts! There are so many scripted moments in this game when you're forced into head-to-head combat that the game being marketed as a stealth game is borderline false advertising. If we accept the theory that the game had to be rushed due to time or budget constraints, then that opens up the possibility that these scripted shootouts were put in place to compensate for the fact that the developers didn't have enough time to program in proper stealth levels. However, even if all of that were the case, and the time and budget constraints really are the explanation for everything I've complained about today, that still does not save this game from scrutiny. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I see no merit in reviewing a game based on what it was originally intended to be, because we will never get to experience that. Reviewing a game based solely on developer vision is speculative, conjectural, and unfair to other games that were closer to their developer's vision, because doing so implies that all the time, effort, and skill that went into those more closely realized works was ultimately unnecessary. So now I come to the rating. I'm going to be doing retrospectives on all 6 main Splinter Cell games, and I will rank each one on a scale of 1 to 6, from best to worst. Right now, this game has no competition, which means that Splinter Cell 1 is the absolute shittiest Splinter Cell game to come along so far. There are 5 more games that I plan on reviewing, so let's see if any one of those other games can save this game from getting the bottom score. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this retrospective, please hit that subscribe button for more videos just like it. Also, if you enjoy my content overall, please consider supporting the channel directly with either Patreon support or channel memberships. Silver and Gold level members and Patreon supporters are allowed to submit requests for video topics, and Gold members and Patreon supporters are allowed to directly assign me video topics that I am guaranteed to fulfill. In the meantime, however, I am Acerthorn, and I will see you guys later. Peace!